Hi, it's Ginger from In Sheep's Clothing Yarn Shop again, and I'm here with Focus on Fiber Arts. So I'm hoping that you're going to join me with knitting. Today we're going to be talking about baby things. We all have little baby gifts that we need to make from time to time. And right now what I'm doing is making these little baby sweaters. These are like eating potato chips. You can't help but make more than one. With all the beautiful yarns that are out here, you want to see what they look like. Now this was the very first one I ever made, and I actually followed the pattern to make it. I'm not a big one for following patterns. Usually I start to make it and then I say, oh, but what if I changed it? So of course I did change the pattern, and I'm going to show you how I change the pattern a little bit later. This one here, what makes this sweater so great is that you start from the top down. So what happens is you cast on your neck stitches and you work from the top down. You make your little sleeves. There's no sewing. So this is just such a great little sweater to make. So because you're starting from the top down, you are increasing as you go. And then what happens is you bind off your stitches to make your little sleeve cap. And then you work down, and your buttonhole is included in the button band as you go. So you literally, once you've cast off for the sweater, all you do is you sew your button on and you're done. Do a little, you can block the sweater out if you want, and it's all ready for gift giving. Now this was a superwash yarn that I used. So actually it's superwash wool. And what happens is they do a process to the wool so that you can throw it in the washer and you don't have to worry about it shrinking up. It also makes the wool a little bit softer too. I happen to really like this one here because it has the multicolors in it. It's even cute in the back. Now another sweater that we've done here is this one. And believe it or not, this is the yarn, but believe it or not, there's no knots in this yarn at all. Everything, there's no finishing. There's no weaving in the tails. There's a special technique that they do of tying the tails so that you just have these tiny little knots that aren't even going to come apart. So again, you start from the top down. Each yarn, not only do you get a striping of color, but if you can see, you get all these beautiful little textures as well. This yarn here has a little bit of sparkle in it. This is a little boucle. It's the same yarn that's around the neck, so it's very soft, has a little bit of a nubbly texture, and actually around the cuff too. Now this sweater is done on a little circular needle. So I start at the top, and then what happens is as we're increasing, you get more and more stitches onto the needle, and then once you bind off, you're back to normal. But what you're doing is you're not working in the round because you want it to be a little cardigan. So you're working back and forth. So this sweater right here is one that I started. So you can see there I am from the top, and this is garter stitch, which means that you knit every row. So I knitted 4 rows, and then as you can see on this little sweater here, I have holes. I have little eyelets, and the reason that there's the eyelets is that's my little deviation. I'm never happy unless I alter a pattern. What happened was when I was doing this sweater, and it has the increases, and it's a make one increase, and that means that you take your needle, and when you're knitting, I'm just going to knit this one stitch here. Well, let me knit a couple stitches. Let me get into the stockinette part. That's the other thing about this sweater is you have this cute little garter ridge border, so it makes your little edging. It also creates it from curling. So it's done. There's no picking up and doing a little edge after the fact. It's just finished. So there's my little, so you're always going to be knitting 4 at the beginning and the end of the row. So now if I want to do an increase, what I would do is this little ladder that's here, this is the make one. I take that little ladder and I put it onto the needle, depending on which way that you knit. I put it onto the needle, and now what happens is, so I've got that loop. Now if I knit into this loop, I do end up with an eyelet. But the way that you're supposed to do a make one is that you put that little loop onto your needle, and then you knit into the back of the stitch, if I can catch it here, okay, and then I knit it. And what it does is now it's twisted that little hole. So it's closed up the hole, and it's also created an extra stitch. So I'll do it again so you can just see how I did that. So I lifted this up, I put it onto my needle, and I'm going to knit through the back of my loop. And there we go. We have another little increase here. So that's great, makes a nice little increase. But as you can see, it's all closed up. There's something about the make one increase I'm not crazy about. I mean, it's just kind of slow for me. So I thought about it and I said, you know what? I can still get an increase and make it decorative. So that's where I came up with the little picot that I do here. And all I do is I knit my stitches. And what I do is I just wrap the yarn around my needle and then I knit. I wrap the yarn around my needle and then I knit. And actually, as I'm doing this, I'm realizing for those of you that are, that are regular knitters, you're probably freaking out right now because you're watching me knit through the back of my stitch. See how I go through the back of my stitch and I knit my stitch? There's a reason I do that. I know I'm knitting through the back of my stitch. I wrap the yarn, when I do my purl stitches, I wrap the yarn a little differently. So because I do that, it's twisting my stitch. So if I went to knit in the front of my stitch like everybody else, most people do, what's going to happen is, you could probably see, I twist my stitch. Now that you really don't want to do. I'm pretty easy going when it comes to knitting, but there's certain things that are just right and wrong, and that's not right. So that's why I'm knitting through the back of my loop, in case you're wondering, or panicking that maybe you're not doing it right. You're doing it right. Just keep doing the way that you knit. It's just that I don't really want to change my style of knitting because this is what I'm comfortable with. So this little sweater, I'm at a point right now. I'm just going to take this back so I can finish knitting this part the way it's supposed to be knitted. So anyway, I'm at the part right now. I've done the yoke, which is this part right here, and you can see there's this little garter stitch. So basically what I did was I went around back and forth on the sweater. I'll just show you this way. Okay. So I cast on and I went back and forth, back and forth. Now as you're increasing, the increasing is giving you the extra stitches to make the little cap for your sleeve. So I'm at this point right now. So when I knit across, instead of just knitting across, I came back and I did the little garter stitch that's going to create our little sleeve, the bottom for our little sleeve cap. So that's where I'm at right now, but I need to bind these stitches off to create the little sleeve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit across, and I'm just realizing maybe I should knit. Maybe I should change my purl so that I won't make everybody all upset when they watch how I'm knitting here. Probably going to have to put a disclaimer about how I knit. But anyway, so here, I'm right at the point. You can see where my garter stitch is. So I want to bind off. Whenever you bind off, you want to make sure that you're binding off what they call in pattern. So this is my garter stitch. So I'm going to bind off in garter stitch. So I'm going to knit my first 2 stitches, and I'm going to pull that stitch over. This is how you bind off. You knit the next stitch, and then you take the point of your left-hand needle, you go into the first stitch, and you pull it over the second one. And you want to do this loosely because you don't want to have that binding, that cap binding especially on a little baby. So I'm pulling that over, I'm knitting across, pulling over, I keep adding one more stitch, and then pulling that stitch over the second one. And I'm doing it loosely. Sometimes if you have a tough time getting it bound off loosely, you can always just take this needle off like that and take a bigger one and just bind off those stitches with a bigger needle, and that'll make it a little bit looser for you. Same thing with casting on too. Sometimes people will cast on with one needle size bigger just so that it won't be too tight. So I'm just pulling that stitch over the second. Now this is creating that cap, and you'll see as soon as I'm done with this section what is actually happening. I'm binding that off. Now this is a fun yarn that I'm using too. This is an acrylic and wool blend, so it's washable, dryable. But the nice little thing about this is that it has multicolors going on in it. So you'll get this nice little gentle striping going on. So it's not, it's nothing plain. It just has a little something to it. I always like something that's a little bit of pizzazz to it. Just go across this cap. Just have a couple more stitches here. And then you'll be able to see how this little sleeve is working. Or cap sleeve anyway. Some people find binding off a little difficult, but it's like anything. The more that you practice it, the easier it gets. It just starts to become second nature to you. All right, now let's see. I think I went one stitch. Nope, one more stitch. Bind this off, and then I can start knitting across like that. And you can see now, there's a little cap. Let's see, where's the front? That's the front of the sweater. And there's the little cap. So now I've done the little cap part. So now what I need to do is I'm going to knit across the back, and then I'll do the next cap. So just continue knitting across. Now for some of you that maybe are continental knitters, you can see how my yarn is wrapped around my left hand, like my left finger like this. So if you're going to knit American, you would just go in and you wrap the yarn around like this. As you can see, I don't have I can do it, but I would really, really need to practice at it to get really good at it, because I don't really feel, it's like a second language. Not particularly comfortable with it. It's okay. I can do it well enough to show somebody how to do it, but I really prefer to go back to the continental. And it's funny when I'm teaching new students and I'll ask them, have you ever knit before? And they'll say, oh, 30 years ago, I don't remember anything. And I always say to myself, okay, well, we'll see about that. And if I show them continental right off the bat and they try to do it and they're having difficulty, I said, well, let's try the other way of knitting. And they start to knit and they're like, oh, and then they can just knit really well. It's like riding a bike, I tell people. And I'm like, you always remember, it's that little muscle memory that you remember how you were taught how to knit. Okay, so now we knit across the back, and here's that second cap. So we're going to knit 2 stitches. You have to knit the first 2, and then you pull that first one over the second. And there's our little bit of binding off. The great thing about this little baby sweater is you can literally do it in a day. I started this one last night, and I would have kept on going, but I said, no, I need to keep this at this point here so I could show all of you how to do this cap, because this sweater is actually destined for a little newborn baby. Her name is Lily, and I'm very excited to get this to her. There we go. Oops. And the thing about this little sweater is you can wear it like a little sleeve, you know, just a little sleeveless sweater, but you can wear a little blouse underneath it, a little turtleneck, but it really, really looks adorable if you have a long sleeve little dress and you wear it over, put it over the top of it. Looks kind of like a little, what's that show, Prairie, the Little Girls on the Prairie, I can't remember the name of it. Little House on the Prairie. Kind of little pinafore thing with the little, they always wore something over the top, and it gives you that little look. Looks very, very, just very cute and kind of vintage looking. It's very sweet. The only other thing about this sweater, though, is that it's definitely girly. It's not a good one for the boys. Although what you could do, so I'm always thinking, what else could you do to change it? So I'm done with my bind off now. So now I'm just going to finish knitting across for the front, and then you will get to see what this sweater is pretty much going to look like. You could make this sleeve, make the little cap into a full-length sleeve. Instead of binding these off, you could put these on a stitch holder. And then they'll both be on stitch holders, and then you can continue with the body, which would be joining and going down. And then you can pick up later and just keep working in the round and make a little sleeve. Then you could make it maybe look a little more boyish. There we go. So now you can see what this looks like, kind of. Being on the circular, if I had it on a bigger circular needle, you could really see it. But there we go. There's the place for the little button. And there's your little sleeve caps. And it's going to be adorable. I think I'm going to do probably a little pink button. But now what I'm going to do is just go back and forth, and I will get the rest of the body of the sweater. And then when you get to the length that you want it to be, you'll change over. So this is stockinette, knit a row, purl a row. And when you get down to the bottom, it's going to be just garter stitch. So knit, 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 nice and easy. And then you can just bind off. So I will go home tonight and I will finish this, and then Lily will have her sweater. But this sweater you can do, I've done it in cotton. And also, depending on what weight yarn you're using, this calls for a worsted weight yarn, which is basically done on like a size 8 needle, 5 to the inch. But you can, depending on the size you want to get, it's a one size pattern, 0 to 3 months. I have been known, again, changing the pattern, adding a few stitches. If you increase 4, just cast on 4 extra stitches, or increase 4 stitches at the neck, you can make it a little bit bigger. Now, if you are interested in making this sweater, you can go on Ravelry.com. It's a free website. It's for knitters, crocheters, spinners, weavers, and you just register. And what's great about Ravelry.com is there's lots of free patterns, and this is one of them. And like I said, it's one of my favorite go-to patterns. And they did it in a worsted weight. They did it in 0 to 3 months. But if you use a bigger yarn, like a worsted, or do a bulky weight, bigger needle, you can get a bigger size. And again, by the same token, you can use a thinner yarn, smaller needle, and make like really, really like preemie size or just born size. And this is another project too that we're going to get to at another time. Same baby theme. If you want a quick little gift, is the little baby hats. And these are done again on a circular needle, but this time you join it and go in the round. And this yarn that's right here, you can see that it's multicolored. It does the patterning all by itself. It's another one of those special yarns that are just great for babies or children that will do something really wonderful and make you look like some really knitting expert, and simple, super simple. One of these you can do in a night in front of the TV. So, speaking of the next time, I hope that you enjoyed yourself, and I hope to see you again with Focus on Fiber.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.